So it doesn't just stop at ticks. There are plenty of pests in your yard that are thriving because of the warmer temperatures. Dr. Mike Raupp with the University of Maryland is joining us now. Mike, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this buggy situation we have. All right, so obviously these bugs are enjoying the heat. Are we seeing some of these bugs migrate farther north because of climate shift?
Hey, Jordan, and good afternoon, Molly. So nice to be back with you guys. Yeah, absolutely. This is my trio of trouble here. That little guy at the top is the black-legged tick vector of Lyme disease. The other guy right about there, the one with the spot on its back, that's the Lone Star tick. And this is the one that's carrying the red meat allergy or ehrlichiosis. What we're finding with many of these tick species and many other insect species, as our climate is warming, those low temperatures that would normally be lethal to them during the winter months simply aren't occurring so much anymore in geographic locations. So there's been a steady march of these insects and ticks further north. For example, Lone Star tick, hey, a few decades ago, New Jersey was the northern limit. But now it's all the way up to Maine, and projections with high fossil fuel emissions put this thing in Canada in a matter of decades.
Wow, so we're actually seeing video of some of these ticks as you're talking, and kind of gives you the creepy crawlies just thinking about them. But let's talk about mosquitoes for a second, because we went over ticks. What about the mosquito population? What does climate change do to them?
Absolutely, same deal. And listen, when temperatures are down in the 70 degrees, it's going to take perhaps 2 to 3 weeks for a mosquito to complete a generation. But hey, here in Maryland, we're going to hit 80s and 90s. When we get to the 90s, they're going to do that in a single week. What this means, basically, Molly, is that the generation time is going to be cut in half. That means in the same amount of physical time, we can have twice as many generations. And this is why we see things like West Nile virus begin to increase during May, June, July, August as temperatures warm. In addition, the cold, lethal temperatures that once limited the range of some of these southern mosquitoes, like the Asian tiger mosquito, yellow fever mosquito, those temperatures simply aren't occurring anymore, and this is allowing mosquitoes to expand their ranges further northward. Also, the fact that spring comes earlier, winter comes later, hey, that simply gives mosquitoes more time to have additional generations to reproduce, and that also amps up our possibilities of these arthropod-borne viruses and diseases.
So I was going to ask, remedies, but we'll get to that maybe in a second. Let's talk about some of these diseases since you brought it up. We know these bugs can pass diseases. Is there a ratio, a general rule of thumb when it comes to mosquitoes or ticks in terms of which have the disease and which don't?
Well, absolutely. And we'll see things. There are certain locations in our country, for example, the whole mid-Atlantic region is basically rife with black-legged ticks that are carrying the Lyme disease Borrelia bacteria with them. In other parts of our country, there are mosquitoes that are carrying many much higher levels of the virus that causes West Nile virus. For example, some of the western states in California, much more so than back here in the east, where our Culex mosquitoes simply don't have that same level of virus in the mosquito population or the bird population from whence that particular virus comes. So yes, it's going to vary geographically depending on what the levels of virus are in things like birds in the case of West Nile. In the case of Lyme disease, how many mice and deer might be infected with the Borrelia that causes Lyme disease. So it's going to be an interplay between the number of hosts in the wild, these wild animals that are the reservoirs for bacteria and viruses, and what that level of virus or bacteria is in the mosquitoes that are transferring it from the wild into the human population. That's going to vary geographically.
A lot of factors there. We want to get real quick to some remedies. What can people do to keep them out of their yards or just out of their lives?
gosh. Well, if we're talking about ticks, the acronym I use is A.I.R. A means avoid that tick bite. Stay to the center of the trail. Don't get off the trail. The ticks are going to be out in the wild. Wear tick repellent on your clothing. I means as soon as you get home, inspect yourself. Get those ticks off in the first 24 hours. The chances of getting a tick-borne illness are going to go way down. And finally, R means remove that tick. Get it off as soon as you can. Inspect and find them, then get them off you. That's going to help. And with the mosquitoes, I use personal protection. When I go outdoors, I'm going to wear light-colored, lightweight clothing. Even on a hot day, that's going to cut down on the bites. If I have exposed skin, I'm using mosquito repellents. And the number one thing right now, gang, with all the thunderstorms, with 90-degree heat, we've got to eliminate those water sources in the landscape where mosquitoes breed. Mm-hmm. Dump that wheelbarrow. Get rid of that flower pot that's collected water behind the tool shed. That'll cut down on the breeding populations of mosquitoes.
Good tips. Dr. Mike Raupp from University of Maryland's Department of Entomology. Thank you so much.
Thank you.